Hey mental workers, welcome back to the Mental Work Podcast, your companion to early career psychology, hosted by me, Dr. Bronwyn Milkins. And today we are talking about case reports. Have you had to do a case report as part of your studies or as part of your registrar program? I have. I did the 5+1 program, and I think I had to do 4 case studies, and they were really hard. It was hard to know what to put in them, how to actually get onto them, beat the procrastination, and then get them passed. And even if you didn't do the 5+1, you did the master's pathway, I think you have to submit case studies as part of that as well. So in reality, all of us are going to have to write case reports. And so it's really good to know how we can manage them better, what good case reports look like, what are some hints and tips if you're struggling with your case reports, and what leads case reports to fail. Because what you can get from AHPRA, if you're submitting to them, is satisfactory or fail. So what's the difference? Here to help us out is our wonderful returning guest, Annie Slater. Hi, Annie.
Hey, Bronwyn. Thanks for having me.
It's such a pleasure to have you back on. Listeners, you might remember Annie from a previous episode, which was on how to get the most out of supervision, which I found really helpful as well. And I'll pop that link in the show notes. But today, Annie is case report extraordinaire. I'm just going to say that because you look at a lot of case reports.
I do, but that's a troubling statement.
And before we get into that, Annie, could you just remind listeners who you are? And I'll get you to say what your non-psychology passion is as well.
Yeah. So I'm Annie Slater. I have 2 businesses. I've got Annie Slater Psychology, where I do my private practice work, therapy and assessments. And then I'm also the director of the Provisional Psychologist Network, which was all about provisional psychology, the registrar program, all the things that people need to become registered. So yeah, and my non-psychology passion would probably be traveling and even creating travel itineraries that maybe I don't even end up doing. It's just like a passion of just like, ooh, we could do this. It's a very good way to dissociate, I think.
That sounds pretty good, like a fantasy itinerary, even if you're not going to go there.
Yeah, I have. It's a bit compulsive, just like looking at really fancy hotels.
I hear that and I'm like, look, it's better than doom scrolling, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a version of doom scrolling.
It kind of is. What's your favourite place to travel to or favourite place that you have travelled to?
Oh, so many. I think I love Switzerland. Lauterbrunnen in Switzerland's probably my favourite. If I had to pick one, it would be there. Anywhere kind of like Europe. I like that.
Amazing. Is there a place that you're itching to go to?
I have a giant bucket list, Bronwyn. It's a real problem. But I think my next one will probably be the Maldives because I haven't been there yet.
Oh, wow. That would be so exciting. God, that would be awesome. Yeah, that's a future itinerary to craft.
Yeah, and help us through winter. See, it's like a bit of I'm imagining
absolutely.
the warp, you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Annie, for sharing your non-psychology passion with us. You're also a board-approved supervisor, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if you said that. Maybe you said that and then I just imagined that you didn't. But anyway, you're a board-approved supervisor. Could you please tell us what you do in your role as a supervisor of provisional psychologists?
Yeah, lots of different things actually. We really just anything that's around increasing people's like competence in the 8 competencies for psychological practice. So individual supervision, group supervision, professional development, case report reviews. I do a lot of case report reviews. And I actually do lots of supervision now, which is nice. So yeah, just old things related to that.
Yeah. And what prompted you to become a supervisor? Like, what do you like about it?
Oh, I love that question. I had some really like helpful and unhelpful experiences, and I think we've all had that in supervision.
Yeah.
And I did the 4+2 back before all of the kind of more recent services had popped up around helping with the MPE. Like all of the services now, they didn't really exist when I did my 4+2. I don't know if you were the same with your 5+1.
Yeah. Yes, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember thinking like, why has no one actually helped more provisionals in learning these things? It's almost like you had to teach yourself. And I was really passionate that shouldn't be the case because I don't know if you were the same, like having just to read the, WISC manual and working it out on your own. And it just was not good. So I just wanted it to be better. And
I was literally thinking of the WISC manual plus reading the 5+1 guidelines, which is like a 30, 40-page document. And anytime I had I pretty much memorized these freaking guidelines for the 5+1 program.
Yeah. Oh, and as a supervisor, I have to keep going back to them. And they're so long that sometimes you question yourself. You're like, I'm sure that's the rule. And I know it's the rule, but I still have to go back and doom scroll through this guideline to find it. Yeah.
It is. It's a cursed document.
Mm-hmm. And the 4+2 is worse. I think it's double the amount of documentation.
Absolutely. So it really came out of a passion to ensure that people had the support maybe that you didn't quite have.
Yeah, yeah. And I loved teaching. So I'm also teacher trained. So that's, so the two go together, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, what a fantastic combination. Okay. So when you say that you've read a lot of case reports, how many case reports do you reckon you've edited?
Oh my gosh, that's funny. I was trying to work this out because I had the prep questions, and it's hilarious. I probably do about 5 a week, and I actually, we have a team of supervisors. Whenever they have a case report that they kind of go, I need a second review just to kind of check if it's on point, I do theirs as well. So I reckon in the time that I've been board approved, I've probably done close to 1,000.
That's insane.
I know. And I only realized that when we put that on the question, but I was like, that is a lot. But you get really good at it and very quick, a lot more efficient, I think, once you've read that many.
I feel like you should get a badge or a certificate or something like has read 1,000 case reports.
I don't know if it's good. I
don't know if that'd be a bit sad, but I guess you'd be very experienced. So you'd know exactly, okay, this is on point, this is not on point.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can really, when you've read that many, it's really clear if someone's done case report training or if they haven't.
Oh, interesting.
And and it just really speeds up the level of editing that you have to do. But you can tell also if it's their first case report or if it's their if it's 4+2, it's their 8th, because you get better at them by the last one. I don't know if you had that experience too, but
you do. I did.
Yeah. It's funny.
Yeah, I'm just imagining you getting to the point where you could be like, this person ate Wheat Bix for breakfast and then wrote this case report. You could do a full depth psychological analysis on their state of mind and their frame and what they're doing.
No, I want Wheat Bix.
Yeah. Okay, and let's just ask why do we have to do this? Why do provisional psychologists have to complete case reports? Why is this even a thing?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because really it's one of the assessment tasks that allow us to demonstrate that we have those core competencies, because as someone who edits them, it's really clear if someone has or hasn't got those competencies that they're assessing when you edit a case report, which makes complete sense because you're developing it, right, over the course of your internship. You don't know everything, particularly at the beginning. But really it is assessing a couple of key things. So it's assessing your ability to complete a semi-structured interview through that lens of, and we may not all agree with it, and this definitely has issues with it, is that medical model, which is, here is a problem, a disorder, in inverted commas. What is the treatment we pair with it that is evidence-based, and we treat it and then we reflect on the outcome. Or even with that psychosocial model as well, really using that as a model for exploring kind of a client's problem. And then also making sure that we can gather the symptoms to then link it to the appropriate diagnosis, and that we are using the appropriate assessment tools that are evidence-based for that client in their age, even just thinking about kind of their cultural background, if there's any individual differences, that then we can diagnose correctly. So we can look at the diagnostic criteria, identify if the client meets them or not, and justify that. And then pick an appropriate treatment for that client based on the diagnosis and their presenting problem and their goals, and then do the treatment. And then reflect on it. So there's lots of things that we do in case reports. And I think the trickiest thing about them, honestly, is the word count. I don't know if you
agree.
Yeah.
100%.
I have, as a board approved supervisor, I have this internal frustration every time I have to do an extra edit just because we have to get it under the word count. It just seems so, I get we have to be succinct and write professionally, But like, I feel really bad for people who work in dual diagnosis or they have clients with more complexity that require you to have more information to justify those things adequately. And the word count is not enough. It's just not.
No, it's not. I remember, like, I've written this sentence. It's a perfect sentence. It conveys exactly what I want it to convey. Yep. How can I cut 3 words off this sentence? And then like having to rewrite sections just so I can have the same information but shorter.
Yeah. And then, but also making it sure that you're not cutting it so much that you haven't gone to like, you haven't, you're writing a full sentence because you have to do that for your case report.
Yeah.
Like it's a tricky thing. You do get better with certain things though. My hacks real quick, because is take out that. It's a useless word in usually most sentences. I think you probably found out when you did them. Yeah. Yeah. And writing nil, blah, 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 whatever the end of the sentence is, because sometimes it's a much easier way of writing the sentence than a succinct way of writing the sentence, I should explain.
And that's handy hacks to have, absolutely. But yeah, so I guess summarising that, it's a great way to demonstrate a lot of competencies that we require provisional psychs to have competence in.
Yeah, and also too, I missed too, is like linking it to research and psychological theories. So, you know, there's so much literature out there and models that we use to conceptualise problems that inform, you know, our diagnosis and our formulation. The case report's really assessing your ability to go ahead and do that effectively and reference. Yay for referencing.
No, I think that's a really good point as well, because one of my case studies that I submitted was on health anxiety. And it really forced me to go read about like a key researcher in health anxiety. There is Paul Salkovskis. And so it forced me to go look up his model and integrate that with my client and work out whether they have ways of presenting that are consistent with that model, and then how would I link that to their treatment, and then how would I assess that. And there's the short health anxiety inventory and stuff like that. And yeah, so it was helpful from that perspective. It really integrates all of that.
Yeah, and I think that's and you learn a lot from them. Like I'm sure you had this experience when you did them too. I know I did and continued to do this, where you get your case report, you write it, and then your supervisor then gives you feedback on things in the formulation that you maybe missed, or things that you hadn't really considered around safety behaviours or avoidance behaviour, like those maintaining variables that we're still getting good at identifying for the formulation and the treatment plan. I think it's such a good opportunity for learning, you know?
It is. It is a really good opportunity. But I guess like maybe from hearing you talk about that, it is a lot as well. Like it's no wonder that folks might struggle with case reports, because it's a lot to show and to demonstrate. And you just have to do lots of learning, and I'm kind of like dangling my hands in front of me to like emphasize that there's a lot. That's all I say.
It's overwhelming. No, it is, right? And even just like writing. Because, you know, in your internship too, you're learning how to write professionally. And even in your case reports, that is a skill that you're still nailing. And so even I just find a lot of it comes down to sometimes to even just editing sentence structure and learning how to write something objectively, not with emotion. You know, all of those are skills that, you know, again, are getting tested with your case report, but you develop them by getting feedback along the way, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And you sometimes don't realise until you get feedback that some of the words you're using might be really emotion laden. Like I can't think of an example. Do you have an example of like an emotion laden?
I literally just did one. I literally was just writing a case report before I popped into this podcast. I was editing it. And what was theirs? Oh, what was it? It was a good one. What was it? Oh, I forget. It was about, the client was consumed with their worry. Consumed. And I was like, it's not a professional way. It's an emotional little, Or even just using like descriptive language that is overemphasizes something or underemphasizes something is another common one. Like, it was awful. Or was it? Like, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And okay, well, let's ask then, what skills does a provisional psychologist need before they start tackling the case reports?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, you know, we start our internship and we kind of, in some ways, a little bit do get thrown in the deep end with our client work. I think with case reports, there are skills even throughout the whole internship that you're still developing. So you may not have nailed them all completely yet, and that's kind of the point, but you want to at least have some foundation of being able to conduct an initial assessment effectively, you need to be able to gather a really good background history that takes into account maybe those predisposing variables, but also to anything related to the onset and course of the problem that also encapsulates kind of that background history, that you can, you understand some of the diagnoses in the DSM, like especially, usually we do, and I know this is the reality of it, more often than not, if we're keeping it simple, we're usually going to do some depression or anxiety disorders because they're a lot easier to write a case report
Yep,
on.
I did both. So I did depression, health anxiety, and I think similar diagnoses in those chapters.
Yeah. And so if you have some good knowledge around what the diagnostic criteria are across some of those key disorders, obviously you can still go and, look up differentials because sometimes that's like the biggest key, and that's what you learn from the case report is like, why wasn't it this disorder then if we think it's this one? That you can pick an appropriate assessment tool. So again, like you can find out, what is an appropriate assessment tool for generalized anxiety disorder, and then carry it out, interpret it, and score it. And then put it into the formulation. So usually when we give our case reports, you absolutely can do case reports on different therapeutic models. So ACT, DBT, you can, but it's much more simple if you keep it to CBT and you do a CBT formulation. So I would say if you've got your CBT formulation down pat and you're still working on that, you're going to have a good ability to probably start doing your case reports with the support of your supervisor, because they should be helping you the whole way through, not just like you come to supervision with your case report. It should be, I'm thinking of doing this case for a case report, and you guys can talk about if it's a good case to do a case report, because some of them aren't some of them are a bit more complex, some of our client presentations.
Yeah, and I totally get this because, there are some presentations which are just, one, they just wouldn't fit in the word count, and two, they're just not a great presentation when you're trying to demonstrate competence in these areas, because that's what you need to do. That's what the case report is aiming to show, I guess, your coordinators, whoever you're assessing it to. But I totally get that dilemma, because I remember during my 5+1, I would have presentations and I'd be like, I really want to do a deep dive into this presentation. It's really complex and I just want to, have a deep dive into it. But then I had to be like, look, that won't make a great case report. Mm-hmm. So I, when you said CBT, both my case reports were CBT.
Yeah. And again, and most people, and I have this with my own primary supervisees all the time, I did it myself. More often than not, when someone does their first case report, if they haven't checked in, because it's really interesting, they'll pick the client with complex needs because they want to understand it, which is a really great.
Totally admire that.
Still bring it to supervision, but that's going to be the supervisor-assessed clients, not the ones we send to APRA.
Yes.
Just to make it a little bit more simple in terms of meeting that, because it's just the word count. It's not workable to do it on a really complex client, like a client with complex needs. It's just not. When you've got multiple comorbidities, it's hard enough to do it with a client that is a single presentation, It's hard.
So when we're talking about any considerations for client presentations, it sounds like your recommendation is less complex, the better?
Yes.
Okay.
Keep it simple, silly, is my mantra. So where possible, not a client with comorbidities. I feel for supervisees who are in workplaces where all of their clients have dual diagnosis, because it makes it really hard. For those people, I recommend almost in some ways parking one of them. So in the background history, you put what the other disorder is and you just focus on the other one. You still have to integrate it, but it allows you to be like, that was existing. That was pre-existing where you can. I would also pick a client, hopefully, where there isn't a lot of risk, because again, it adds words. It's not that you wouldn't have done a good job or you couldn't rule out that risk effectively, but where there is, you have to demonstrate that you managed it, not just in the risk section, but also in the treatment plan. And so it's more at risk of maybe hitting some more of those critical errors that might lead to a fail. What else? A client that generally is well motivated, has good insight, that you got good rapport with, just because you can still write a case report for intervention where the intervention wasn't effective. You actually can. It's just more about having to justify it, and it all just kind of comes down to that word count. It's going to be easier for your validity of your assessment too if you have a client that you have good engagement with, and you're pretty certain about your conclusions because you have good rapport. Yeah. What else? What do you think? Is there anything else that you've thought about clients?
Just on that, like clients who are motivated and you've got good rapport with, I relate to that because I remember writing a case report for one client, and as I was writing the case report, there were a few questions that came up for me, and I was like, I don't actually have this information from the client's background or their history. And so I was able to ask the client, and I was like, hey, like, I think I might have missed this, and I think it's important for us to understand, like, ask the questions, get the answers. And I'm like, thank you. And that'll help me integrate that into treatment for you, and it's good for me to know as well. And they were able to readily provide me with that info because they had that capacity.
Yeah. And again, not all supervisees are going to work in areas where they have those clients, which I feel for them. Because APRA kind of makes the assumption almost that you're not going to have the complexity when you're in your... That's not reality, because all the jobs usually are available in the areas where we're working with clients with complex needs. Or more likely to, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's hard. And I think the other thing too is just being really mindful when we're picking clients is that for the case reports, for the 5+1 where you only have to do 4, it's a little bit easier. But for 4+2s, they have to pick 8 different diagnoses. So you have to be really intentional around when you are picking which diagnoses you're doing for which client, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because you might have a client and, you can't do generalized anxiety twice. So, really getting good at kind of noticing your client list and being like, oh, I haven't worked with this yet. This is a case report. I have a case report client. I need to document. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about submitting to APRA, is failing common?
I don't know. I don't think failing is very common. I think there are some reasons why there might end up being more likely to be a fail. Unfortunately, I've had a few, because of my experience in the network and having lots of supervisees just come in for case report reviews. There seems to be a pattern because this is the role of the supervisor. It's the supervisor's role to read and review the edit to make sure that it's met the standard and that we don't submit a case report if it has critical errors and kind of editing it and supporting them to choose another case, right? But some supervisors haven't done formalised case report training. It's not in our board-approved supervision training at all. Oh. I do lots of supervision with supervisors to help them learn the skills on how to write a case report, and it's a skill for us too, right? We could be an excellent clinician, doesn't mean you can nail a case report.
Yeah.
What I would say there is sometimes I've had supervisees who failed too. And they've got not my ones that I've reviewed, but they come in and it's quite clear their supervisor maybe doesn't have the skill to edit it to the level that's required for APRA. And so they just need someone else. So if supervisees are ever failing more than one, like one is kind of like, let's look at the feedback and see if we should have noticed that, if that's a really obvious error that like stood out, or is this like a pattern? And actually maybe my supervisor doesn't necessarily have the skills because they shouldn't be submitting them to APRA if they have critical errors. We should be able to identify them.
That makes sense. Are there any common areas or reasons you've seen that people fail?
Yes. So the APRA have some really good guidelines on what is a critical error. So when you look in they have like for each of the pathways, there's a summary. It's even got things like on how to choose a case report, pretty much what we've talked about.
Gosh, I don't remember that.
Yeah. Most people avoid kind of the giant guidelines, right? Because they're a bit boring. But they have actually a discussion of what is a critical error in the guidelines. Oh. And when I review a case report, like these things stick out quite clearly. And so they're things like really poor English expression and too many grammatical errors. Now, I've never had an experience where a supervisee has failed just on that, but it's something to consider when you're reviewing it. Plagiarism. That has come up before where people have just...
don't plagiarise.
That's a good rule, like code of ethics, just don't do that. Especially if you're using someone else's example. Lots of case report trainings like mine has examples of case reports. They are examples, they are not to use as a template. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, And you really don't get the learning if you're plagiarizing as well.
No, not at all. Like, as a template's different to like using it completely. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, 100%. The other critical errors are things like if you fail to do a risk assessment or the risk assessment isn't clear and doesn't manage the risk effectively. So say, for instance, a client has disclosed in the background history or current problem that there is like family violence at home, say, for instance, and it's a child. And we've got to the risk section and we've ignored that there may be a need for mandatory report, and we've just ignored it. That's like an ethical issue that would be flagged, and it would be an automatic fail because we haven't met the standard. Because that's what the case report's just testing, the standard. Yeah. And it's a pretty high standard, but we should have a high standard because we're talking about client care and, you're wanting to hit the kind of good standard.
Yeah.
If you have used or interpreted any of the psychological tests incorrectly, or described them inappropriately or used one inappropriately. So say, for instance, a client comes in and they're just describing this pattern of depression and you pick this random screener that has nothing to do with the client's presenting problem, it's going to fail because, like, what was the rationale for that? You're not integrating it effectively. Any intervention, so say, for instance, you've got a diagnosis and then you pick a treatment that is just not evidence-based for that presentation, or doesn't take into account the individual client. So say, for instance, it's a client with, cultural differences, and we have not even slightly considered how we might modify our intervention or how we might think differently about that client in their formulation given that cultural difference. That's likely to be a fail. What else? Not using a diagnostic system would probably be another one. What else?
I've seen somebody, like when I was doing my case reports, I've seen somebody fail for the differential diagnosis section. So they didn't justify why they didn't meet these criteria and they didn't consider enough alternative diagnoses.
Yeah, that is a really good one. You notice that as a marker. So what happens is if I read a case report, this is probably a really good feedback. If I read a case report, I should be able to tell by the background, if not the symptom section, what diagnosis CS is, right? Yep. And so if I get to differentials and there's these weird symptoms that have been described in the other sections that may allude to other differentials, the real common ones are things like irritability that come across lots of different disorders. And then I have completely failed to even talk about like the other disorders where that little symptom we've definitely assessed and it was in the DAS or whatever. I've ignored it. That is a really good, that is a real common critical error.
Yes.
And that also takes, and this is probably another one that I notice as a marker, is ignoring. I'll have a case report and I get why people do this because they're trying to keep it simple for themselves. And I'm reading it and it sounds exactly like this client has ADHD or undiagnosed autism, and they're coding the appropriate diagnosis that's probably comorbid, but had missed all the things in the presenting problem that this client also may be neurodivergent. That's probably another one that really stands out when I edit a case report.
Okay. And This makes me think, like, do you know who marks these reports at APRA? Like, do you know?
It's a great question. It would be other psychologists. I would imagine there's like psychologist officers at APRA. I don't know any of them.
Wow.
I'm tempted. This came up to me when I was preparing for our podcast, probably, because I was like, how do you get that job?
Well, that's what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking. I was like, where are these secret job ads for psychologists who mark APRA reports? Like, is it internal hires? Wow, this has just like opened up like a deep, like dark, like vacuum for me to Google on.
But they are very on point. So whenever I've read, because I get to, when someone fails, usually they bring it to me and we have a quick read of a second review. Like, there has never been a time where I have reviewed APRA's feedback about the case report and disagreed. Like, it's always been like, yeah, that's right. Why did we miss this? Who missed this in reviewing it?
Wow. If the person who marks the case reports is listening to this podcast, can you send me an email?
Yeah, because imagine how many they've edited.
They're like the grand boss of case reports.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I want to meet that person. Anyway, so there are two types of case reports. There's an assessment case report. There's an intervention case report. What's the difference?
So in some ways they're the same but different. So The harder case report to write, in my opinion, and again, it comes down to word count, is the intervention ones. And the reason for that, and this is, we should clarify too, our whole conversation so far have been dictated around like the 5+1 and 4+2 case reports, because they are very, very, very different for the registrar programs. Yeah, because I've done them too, just having completed my master's. They're much more like literature based and less like therapeutic based, is in my opinion. Yeah, but for the ones for APRA, so with the intervention ones, they are the same. So you still have to do reason for referral, presenting problem, background history, symptoms, diagnosis for both the assessment and the intervention ones. But they become different after the diagnosis section, obviously if it's assessment or intervention. So for both the assessment and intervention, you still have to have done the assessment. You still have to have come to a conclusion, or there have been a diagnosis or a problem for you to actually do the intervention treatment on. So really the difference is when you get to the treatment ones, is that instead of with the intervention ones, you're talking about the treatment plan that you created for the client that you assessed, and then you carry out that treatment, reflect on it, think about how you implemented that intervention strategy, and talk about the client's outcomes in terms of your treatment goals. And then you have to come up with a prognosis for the treatment one. The assessment one is a little bit different, and it's much easier. It's much easier to stay within the word count for the assessment ones. Did you have that experience when you were writing?
Because you just have to propose the treatment, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not what I did. It's like, based on my assessment, this is what we would recommend for this client, and then we just do a reflection of the validity and reliability and differentials, how we ruled out the differentials really in the assessment section. So the intervention ones are harder to write. So I say to my supervisor, start with your assessment ones.
That's a good hint.
Because, if you can do that, you'll be better placed to then move on to your treatment ones, because it is tricky to keep it within the word count, especially if your treatment was longer or it was a client with several goals. It's hard.
Yeah, I was fortunate in air quotes, because when I was doing my internship, I was mainly working within a public health service where clients had up to 6 sessions. So it was only 6 sessions. That was great for treatment case studies, because I only had to write about 6 sessions. And that was good. And then terminate treatment, and I had to plan for 6 sessions, and I could say this is a 6-session service. I imagine it's much harder for other folks who are working within different services where the sessions are endless.
Yeah, and I sometimes think too, it's sometimes hard too to do it with the short session plan, because if you have someone and we look at the evidence base for I'm going to treat this, the evidence base is well, actually you need 20 sessions, but I've only got 6. So how do I modify this to pick the appropriate things that are the priority, knowing I only have 6 and being able to justify that effectively, and then have an outcome?
I think I emphasize continuity of care and be we're going to provide the first service to address these goals, and then the client will be referred on to other services to address the other goals.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
And that's what you do in your prognosis section. Does this client need further treatment? Yes.
Yes.
Because I only had 6 sessions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But it's pretty tricky. I guess we've talked about problems that you see as a supervisor in case reports. What are some tips for completing a case report?
Okay. So I have lots of tips. So my first one would be that you are taking your initial assessments that you do with clients, that first 1 to 2 sessions where you're doing your formulation and you are coming up with a bit of a diagnostic hypothesis and treatment plan. Take that to supervision to see if there's anything that you missed, for your supervisor to help you determine if this is going to be a case report client.
Great
if this
idea.
is something that use your supervisor. That's what they're for. I think a lot of people, they come at the end, and then the supervisor's because we have limited time in supervision. They come at the end and you're oh, I wish you hadn't picked that assessment. Oh, I wish we'd done this. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that was totally me. I literally the way I used my supervisor, and it's embarrassing, but it was I said to my supervisor, hey, I'm thinking of doing a case study on depression with this client. Supervisor, yep, that sounds good. Okay, writes whole thing, then returns to supervisor. It's probably not the best approach. Like, I was lucky that I didn't have like glaring like oversights, but it's that was lucky.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's a lot of people's experience too. And also, I think I often say to my supervisees, like, where we're unsure, because as someone who edits them, like, you can put information in later in the case report because you've only written some of it and bring it to supervision, and it seems like something versus when you've written the whole thing, because it integrates differently when you start to add more symptoms, if that makes sense. So what I often say is maybe write the presenting problem, the background history and the symptoms for us to then work that out before you keep going down the rabbit hole of, is this going to be a good case report? Because at those levels, if you've done some assessment, a supervisor should be able to talk you through if this is going to be a good fit, because you'll be able to hear very quickly, like, oh, we've got comorbidity. That's actually comorbid, not a single problem. What else would be my tips? Oh, is my other tip, which a lot of people miss. So there are actual checklists that APRA have written, and you're actually meant to tick them off and then send it with your case report, so that you follow and make sure that you've like nailed the right information in each section, because that is what APRA uses to mark you, is actually the checklist. So on our website, we have like a template that has the checklist embedded so that you can just delete it as you're writing it. It's just an easier way. So if people want to download that, they can. It's free on the website, so that's fine.
Yeah, and I was telling Annie before we started the episode that I went into my 5+1 case study folders and I found these checklists in there, and I couldn't remember them, but I'd used them. I'd completed them. And I was shocked. I was like, oh, wow, this is really handy. Nice one.
And I love APRA's. I think they must have so many people like just not follow the checklist. Like, and I know I get some case reports sometimes, and they're like the old, like there's been changes to the case report format over time. So some of the things that we had, and like they used to call the observation section MSC, like there's been some changes, and you can pick up when someone's used an old version of the checklist very quickly. So definitely use the current up-to-date one would be my advice, because it will save you time. What other tips? Do a case report training. It's a skill would be my
I
advice.
wish I had done a case report training instead of like just trudging through on my own. I should have done it. I didn't do it because none were available when I was doing mine. So
me either.
Yeah.
We figured it out.
I would have loved to have done one though.
Yeah, and they're not long. Usually, like, there's heaps of different providers out there who provide the training, and they'll show you an example. And I think seeing a case report that's passable and you can actually look at what it looks like and what the content is, really helps you kind of write your own, and will save you a lot of time. Like, it's really clear to me when I get a case report to edit if someone has or hasn't done a case report training. And, if you think about how much it costs you to have a supervisor review one of your case reports, it will 100% save you money, because the case report trainings, most of them range probably for about $100. You're paying your supervisor per hour. You'll easily cut you down an hour of supervision if you've got a good template and you understand how to put what into what section.
I mean, I think it would just have helped me feel more confident, because the way that I did it was I sought out textbook chapters, and so I read them, and then I just tried to do my best with that. But I kind of didn't know what I was doing. Just, tried hard. But yeah, I would have felt more confident if I had the training.
Yeah, I still remember going to my supervisor with my first case report edit and just being terrified, because I was like, I don't even know if this has hit the standard, and I don't even know my treatment plan's okay, and it was fine. But I'm glad we can take that anxiety out, because I think some of that sometimes too generates people's procrastination with the case reports, whereas if you know what to do and you've been reassured that it's going to be okay, it can kind of help with that stuff. So what else? There's a literature review by the APS that I share with all of my supervisees that's also super helpful in justifying evidence-based treatment.
Okay.
Because that's what APRA is looking for.
Yep.
So if listeners just Google APS literature review evidence-based practice, it will pop up. It is this giant document with a whole bunch of references around the literature base for different treatments and the evidence that they have.
Yep, I've seen it. I know I've got it saved, so I know what it is. I'm pretty sure it has like a pink cover.
It does. I think they've changed. It was purple. I think they've got a new one. Okay. So I can't remember exactly the year, but Google, the new one will come up. Thank you for that APS literature review. It's very helpful. We can just say that's the level and the evidence base, so that's a win. What else would be my tips? Read out your case report out loud. I know, because what happens is I edit so many, and we all do this. It's a common bias. You spend so much time reading and rewriting that case report, you cannot see the grammatical errors.
It's true.
So true, and we all do it. And so what I would say is read it out grammatically, like with your the full stops and the commas, and making sure that it actually sounds what you wrote.
Yes. Oh my God, I'm like shaking my head in frustration because my dad a few years ago went back to do some further study, and because I've got a few degrees and stuff, he was like, Bronnie, can you edit my stuff? And I was like, of course, Dad, I will help. And eventually it led me to being like refusing to read my dad's work unless he had promised me that he had read it out loud. And I was like, did you read it out loud? Because there were so many missing words like the and of and like everything else. And I was like, Dad. So yes.
And I don't know if you had this experience, but I think when I did my 4+2, I don't think my writing style was amazing.
Oh, no.
But I have to edit so many like poor writing that it improves your writing.
It does.
So, future goals, people, if you find someone who has difficulties with their sentence structure, offer to read other people's, because it actually can start to really demonstrate for you the issues with sentence structure and expression. And, I definitely think that can help if you start editing others. And then start early. They take longer than people anticipate to write. Even just the reviews with your supervisor, like the back and forth that can kind of occur. I think just planning, being realistic from how long it will take, because lots of supervisees, because they procrastinate and for lots of different reasons, might leave them to the end.
Yep.
And then it's like this rush to get it done.
Yep.
And so, if you can, if you're listening, any time to start is better than not starting.
I totally underestimated how much time it would take to write the case reports. And I was like, it would take a month. And that was me like trying to be generous to myself. I was like, it would take a month. It took like 3 or 4 months at least.
Yeah. About a month a case report probably, depending on how much time you have outside to do the second edit, the third edit if it needs to happen, which can go back and forth too.
Okay. Any other tips or tricks?
I think they're the big ones. I think they're probably the biggest tips, is just making sure your supervisor is good with case reports. Because the other thing too is making sure your supervisor is competent in the thing that you're reviewing for your case report, right? So I review lots of case reports. There's some presenting problems or assessments I won't touch because I'm not competent to tell you if you did it right or wrong, right? Not all supervisors have those skills. So just making sure, that that's their area of competence, and if not, get a secondary supervisor to look at it.
Yeah. So if your supervisor is not competent in the assessments or treatments that you want to write about, would you suggest that the supervisor say, I'm going to find somebody else, or should the supervisee try and seek out other people? And how would they do that?
It's a good question. I think it's a team effort, to be honest. Like if I had something, my supervisee, I would hope that I had already assessed that if they were doing something that, like working in practice, doing things that I couldn't support them with, that I'd already got them a secondary supervisor who was skilled in that area, because really supervisees shouldn't be really working unless they have adequate supervision in the thing that they need. So really it should have been addressed when they looked at kind of adding a job or, discussing that in supervision. But I would say it's a team effort. If I have a supervisee and they bring something and I'm like, oh, this isn't my area of super expertise, I'll either refer it to someone in my team to have a look at, and we do it from secondary supervision, but the primary still has to sign off on it, which is the reality of it. But supervisors understand that. It's just the reality.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So are there any specific resources that you would suggest for case reports that you found handy or you've recommended them to your supervisees?
Yeah, we were talking about it before we started recording. We were like, that one. So, and we were like, how do you say his name? We don't know.
I don't know. I just say Leahy.
Yeah. So I don't know if we can add a little thing on the podcast below, and I can maybe link it. But so there's treatment plans and interventions for depression and anxiety disorders. So that's Leahy 2012 et al. APA reference there. It's really good because you're probably going to be doing a depression or anxiety disorder, and it's really good at demonstrating the assessments that are appropriate for each of the disorders, how you rule out differentials, what is the formulation, because you need to know each of the formulations for the disorders. And that's so important to be able to integrate all that into your case report. And then what's the treatment? What is each of the, it's not just CBT. There are so many different interventions in CBT that you need to be aware that match to the treatment. So it's a really good book, I think. I still use mine. I've still got it.
I still refer to it. Yeah, I do. So I would take that as my starting point, and I'd read that chapter, and then I would feel much better and much more informed about what I'm doing. And it would also have references that I could look up. So even though it's from 2012, like something that I do is that I'll grab the, say, 2012 reference, and then when you Google it, it has like cited by, and then you can see more recent research that has cited it, and you can get eventually to a review or something.
Yeah, and I think they might have, because this was I pulled these resources from my case report training. I think there might be an updated one. Oh, really? So, because this was from like obviously when I did it, so it's probably it's like, but I know there's probably a new edition, because that's the second ed. I'm pretty sure there'd be a newer ed.
I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes.
All right, cool. Google it. Awesome. Yeah. And then the other one that I would say, and it's for similar reasons, and this was actually a textbook in my master's course, and I hadn't used it before, but I'm really glad that I purchased it. It's a bit more in the pricey range for textbooks. You know how like you can buy some and they're like $30, $40, and then you buy some and you're like, oh my gosh, this is an investment. This is one of those investment ones. I think it's about $150, I think, but it's something that is very good in terms of the literature and good for practice. So it's called The Handbook of Adult Clinical Psychology, an Evidence-Based Practice Approach. There's a child version and an adult version. So Karen McNulty is the authors. And the reason I like it, the adult one is broken down into the different clusters of disorders in the DSM. So it'll have like a section on psychotic disorders. It'll have a section on depression disorders. It'll have, and in there, it has all the things around which assessments for which disorders, for which treatment, and the formulas.
That's handy.
Yeah, super handy. And it's got a couple of other really good sections too around like how to write really well. Like there's some extra things in that book that I think are really effective, but mostly for the formulation and the references. I think it's a good textbook to have. What else? The DSM would be another one,
I was going to say
obviously.
that one. Yeah.
And actually read it. I have heaps of supervisees who we'd go through their case report and we have a conversation about it, and we talk about the differentials. And I really encourage them to go and actually read that diagnosis and all of the extra literature that is in the DSM. Because you know how we have the diagnostic criteria and then it has like...
Yeah, it has like the description and like it actually has the differentials in there.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's a really good point really to quickly just segue back to. We don't have to, in our case reports, do all of the differentials that are under each of the disorder. It's just the ones that are justified by the symptoms.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you don't have to... you don't have to justify that it's not a differential if it's in the DSM. It's more that is the symptom justifying the need to rule out the differential. So, and get the current version of the DSM, which I think if supervisees want to save, like if it's
I use the online one.
Yeah. And AAPI, I think once you register,
you can get it for free through AAPI. I prefer the online one actually because you know what? They actually do updates to it periodically. So they will put it on the online version and they'll be like, oh, this has been updated, and you can click on it and then they'll tell you the little update. But I also do a lot of Control F to search for particular words, and I find that very handy.
I like that. You know what I do? And this is probably not, well, maybe. I find this one, I don't know if you've seen this one, the little baby one.
I've seen that one. Yes, the pocket book.
This is when I'm doing case report reviews on holidays because I don't want to take that giant people can't probably see, but it's like the desk reference and it's this tiny like little cute DSM that just has the diagnostic criteria because that's all I need is the supervisor. So yeah.
But yeah, on reading the DSM as well, you know how earlier you were talking about like you should be able to know from reading the presenting problem and the background, like what diagnosis this is potentially leading to. Yeah. I find that reading the DSM is really handy for that as well because under the criteria, it will be like patients commonly present with XYZ.
Yep.
And then you can be like, oh, yes, my client, they're presenting with XYZ, so I can put that in my case report because that's an obvious factor that goes along with depression, for example.
Yeah, perfect. Or you're like, that doesn't sound like my client.
Exactly.
Which one's my client? Oh,
Yeah.
is this a trauma disorder?
Exactly.
Yeah, super helpful. And the other ones that I would just recommend just for treatment planning, because I think I don't necessarily as a clinician use these treatment plans because they're very, very long but I think they're a good start for case reports if you're like, what would be an appropriate evidence-based treatment for this client and what would that session structure look like? It's good for case reports in that sense, but not my favorite treatment planner, I guess I'd say, because the treatment plans are really, really long.
Which one is it?
So it's called the Complete Adult Psychotherapy Treatment Planner by...
I was thinking of that one.
Yeah, Jong's mum. I don't know if you have that feeling too. I'm like,
they're too
30,
long.
40 sessions. But you look at it and go, okay, that's an evidence-based sequence for this. How can I take that and really modify it for my client?
Yeah, and I can't remember if the Leahy one... Does that one have treatment plans as well? Because I remember there's a book, I can't remember which book it is, but there's one which had like short treatment plan and then super long treatment plan. Oh. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I've never that would be very helpful. Google, I like that, Bronwyn. Keep going.
Yeah. I'm just going to have a quick look at my my folder actually.
I love
One moment, please.
While you do that, I'll talk about NovoPsych. Is that okay?
Go for it. Yes, please do.
NovoPsych is also an amazing resource. It used to be free. I've just realized I'm going to have to go back and modify my case report training because it's not free anymore. It used to be so good. NovoPsych is a software where we have lots of appropriate evidence-based assessments, should I say, based on different presenting problems that you can do online. So you can email it to the client, it'll score it and send you back a report. And you can use actually a lot of the references that NovoPsych have put in about the assessment. So it can be really helpful there. And it's just a massive time saver.
There is a student plan though.
Oh, there you go.
I think the student plan might be free.
When? Yay.
I think I'm currently on it because I'm studying the bridging program right now. So I was like, look, I'm not practicing this year. Can I please be on the student plan?
I should have done that. Why didn't I do that, bro?
I don't know. Annie.
That's so good.
Yeah. But yeah, check it out. They're very responsive with contacting them as well, I've found.
That's good, yeah. And that you can track it over time. So you'll get this beautiful graph that you can put in your GP letters. Snipping tool. Yeah. There you go. That's how we...
No, it's super handy. I just found this treatment plan. It is from the Leahy book. So
there you go.
From Treatment Plans and Interventions for Depression and Anxiety Disorders, 2nd edition. And it's got, I just picked up the one for generalized anxiety disorder, and it's got general plan of treatment for generalized anxiety disorder. And it's much shorter, and it's literally got like assessment, socialization, relaxation, mindfulness, cognitive evaluation, interpersonal interventions, problem solving, phasing out treatment.
Love it. Love it. So good. So good. So good. So I'm glad that we already recommended that one, see?
Yeah,
that's
too.
How good we are, Bronwyn.
Yeah, wow. Ahead of ourselves.
But they would probably be my resource. Is there anything else you used during yours that you were like, ooh?
Well, like not specifically for case reports, but I'll just grab up the title so I can, let me see if I can find it. It's the why do people have surnames that I can't pronounce?
Relate.
But it's the Stritsky one. There's but let me just see if I can find it. Where would it be? Oh my gosh, I have so many things over the years that it's such a struggle to work out where I put things now.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I've got it. So it's Clinical Psychology for Trainees, and it's by Andrew Page and Werner Stritsky. Yeah. And they have a chapter, I believe, on case reports, which I found really helpful.
I like that. And while you were saying that, I was also thinking like the Centre of Clinical Interventions, they have some really good, links to kind of workbooks that are very manualised treatment for different presentations that you can use to kind of justify and work through a treatment plan with a client from a CBT perspective. So they can be quite good. And I think they've even got things now around DPT, IPT. I think they've got a few different things. It's not just CBT.
No, yeah, and that's exactly what I did. So when I first started out, I would rely on the Centre for Clinical Interventions a lot for their manualised treatments that they had, and they're all free. But for health anxiety, for instance, I followed their health anxiety module and they had references in the module as well. And they used a CBT/metacognition approach. And yeah, it was really good. It was really anxiety relieving as a early career psych to use those.
Yeah, because it's really clear, and you actually learn a lot from those because they're very explicit.
You do.
And so does the client, because then they can take it home.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, the last thing that I wanted to ask you about, Annie, was that we mentioned earlier that some people get stuck in procrastination with case reports. How would you suggest that they overcome this?
I think most of us get caught in that procrastination. Like, I think we're all human. And I think we have to formulate the procrastination itself, because there's different functions of procrastination. Like, some people are perfectionistic procrastinators. Some people, like, everyone has their different kind of function for the procrastination.
Yeah, there's a CCI module on that.
Yeah, there you go. Everyone, self-therapy, there you go. Yeah. Work through it. Some of the things I've recommended over time, and it's different for everyone, and these were some things that I also did during some of them I did and some of them I didn't. But, and I've seen this on our Facebook group, like the Provisional Psych Facebook group, where people will set up, kind of like body double support groups where they're like, once a week, we're going to just do an hour of our case report together. We're just going to get online, and it's like non-negotiable. We're just going to just be there, and it's just, we have to do it. I think they're really great. The way I kind of did it, and I kind of try to support supervisees, is sometimes the whole case report feels overwhelming. Like, I'm going to do the case report. And it's the same as kind of when we work with clients and we just try to break it down into manageable chunks, which is, how about we just start from reason for referral, and that's due next week. And next week you can do the presenting problem section. And, how many sections are there in a case report? I think there's about, 10 or something. By the time you've got through 10 weeks, you've written a case report, or at least the draft. That can be a really helpful way. Some of the things that I used to do as a provisional, I love the Pomodoro technique. Like, I just find that it's like, that seems achievable. I'm just going to do it for 20 minutes and then whatever. And then I just want to keep going, which can be really helpful. And I used to just pair it with rewards, to be honest. I'd be like, Annie, you're going to do your case report this Saturday, and I'm going to do this much of it. And if I get to the end, then I'm allowed to go out and hang out with my friends. And then it's like, yes, I finished it. Yeah, I think there's lots of different ways you can navigate it. How did you find them? Is there anything that you did when you had yours?
I kind of did them in different ways. There were a few that I just hyper-focused my way through, and I completed a good draft within a week, and I was just like, this is now my life. Yeah. There were others that I completed, over a long time. The Pomodoro technique really does help me, and I totally relate to giving yourself rewards. So it would be, and it'd also have to be the first thing that I do. So
Same.
I wasn't allowed to look at my emails or check social media or anything. If I did the case report for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break, you can look at it then, and then you can get back to it. So it was a lot of self-negotiation.
Yeah, and I think too, when I did them too, it was just trying to work out, when am I the most cognitively functioning and not distracted, because they actually take up a lot of brain space to write.
They do.
And thinking about your client and moving back and forth, even between the different sections, it's a lot. I've had some supervisees too that, different times, and that they've really benefited from having some due dates. Because I think this is the tricky thing with the internship, is it's like, this is what you have to do at some point during the internship. We would like you to have these done by the end. You can't finish till you get them done, but it's very flexible. And sometimes that flexibility for some people isn't helpful. They actually need some this is due next week, and I'm, accountable for that. And what do I need to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes have that conversation with your supervisor too, because sometimes it can be helpful just to have a due date.
No, I agree completely. And not shifting that due date unless there is a critical emergency that warrants shifting it.
It's tricky too. And I think just taking the pressure off, I think if you're a perfectionistic procrastinator, is this like, it doesn't have to be perfect the first edit. Like it's not meant to be, like just something. Yeah. Looking at our own CBT for our own thinking.
Yeah, usually like my standard is it's readable and my supervisor's not going to be frustrated or look at me in pity if they read it.
Yeah. In pity.
Yeah. Like, oh no, Bronwyn really doesn't know what she's doing here. Like, so I'm like, okay, as long as I can anticipate that those things will be pretty all right, I'm all right with this.
Yeah. I'm the supervisor that's A for effort. You did it, and now we can like work on what needs to be improved. Because if you don't know, you don't know. That's why you don't know.
Yeah, you're a prop psych, like you're learning.
Yeah. But you're right too. There's some accountability for like we can Google treatment plans. You also can look into that ourselves too. So it's hard, but yeah, I'm glad they're over for me. I won't lie. Like, is that a bit of smugness? Like, good luck, everyone.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a bit, but yes, doing the bridging program right now, I've literally just had to finish like 2 more case reports. Yeah, and I was like, oh gosh, why?
And they're so different, right, to the Apple ones. They're really different.
Are.
They're really different. And I did all the things I tell my supervisees not to do for mine. I picked like a trauma presentation, EMDR. I was like completely regretted it. I was like, why didn't I follow my own advice? Why didn't I do that?
Yeah, totally. I picked like schema therapy and like some, just rare presentations and
Don't be like us. Don't be like us. Keep it simple.
Like
Keep it simple. We'll get
do as
there.
I say, not as I do type thing.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my goodness. But yeah. But I guess I'm now torturing myself because I edit them. But I actually really enjoy it. I actually really enjoy kind of the whole process. It's an interesting thing, even just the learning.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, Annie, is there a top thing that you want listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Oh, that's a good question. A top thing. Checklists. Use the checklist from Aqua. And if you can, because I do think it's worth your investment, it saves you time, is to do a case report training so that it's really clear for you what goes in each of the sections. I think that would be the biggest takeaway, that it's not some simple thing, it's actually a skill, and it's a skill that you're developing.
It's quite a complex skill as well.
Yeah, and involves lots of skills to do it well.
Yeah,
it
does. Annie, if listeners want to learn more about you or get in touch, where can they find you?
So they can go to the Provisional Psychologist Network. That's where you'll find me. We also have a Facebook group too that supervisees can jump into, particularly if they want to set up things like case report kind of groups where you do find a buddy. Their online forums are quite helpful for that. So they're probably the 2 places.
Excellent. And Annie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure to have your insights and your knowledge.
Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. It's been good to have you, and I hope you gained a lot from this episode. If you liked this episode or any one of our other episodes, do leave us a 5-star rating and review. It really does help other people find the podcast. Hope you have a good one. Catch you next time, and bye.